Imagine this, just one wrong glance, and suddenly you're standing trial in an interstellar court, yeah? That's what happened to me. All I did was look at the tail of an alien commander, and apparently that's the equivalent of publicly proposing marriage. How does one awkward stare turn into a life-or-death rescue mission? And why does a being with total control over her mind and body completely lose it every time I'm around? Sit up straight, Major Anderson. A cold green light poured down from the ceiling, casting sharp shadows over my tangled hair and wrinkled uniform. A semicircle of chairs faced me, their occupants whispering among themselves in a low, uncomfortable hum. The council. But not just any council. This was the High Interstellar Exchange Committee. To my right sat Earth's diplomatic representative. To my left, 3 Xyrith dignitaries, their skin a pale silver-tinted blue, their jet-black eyes deep and unblinking. Major Robert Anderson, Earth Interstellar Defense Force ID, number 784621. Captain Hayes read aloud, a charge with violation of Article 31.4 in the Interstellar Protocol for Cross-Species Communication. My throat was bone dry. This was the 3rd time I'd heard that accusation, and I still couldn't believe it. The specific offense. Hayes hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Deliberate and public provocation of cross-species sexual response. A sharp hissing sound came from the Xyrith seats. I didn't know what it meant, but I was pretty sure it wasn't good. The defendant will now state their position, said the chairwoman. Admiral Harrington, she looked at me like I just stabbed a hole in space-time with a plastic fork. I just told her I liked her tail, I said, licking my lips. I didn't mean to offend or provoke. It was just a compliment. Silence, not normal silence, the kind of silence you could cut with a knife. The 6 Earth delegates stared at me wide-eyed. The 3 Xyrith ambassadors were frozen in place. If it weren't for the faint twitching of the fine tendrils on their cheeks, I would have thought they'd turned to stone. And then she walked in, Sael Thara, commander of the Xyrith 7th Fleet Assault Division, tall, elegant. Her luminous silver-blue skin shimmered beneath the council chamber lights. But that's not what caught my eye. It was the tail. Roughly a meter long, covered in tiny crystal-like scales, it swayed behind her like it had a mind of its own. And like every time I was anywhere near her, it was glowing. Softly, subtly, unmistakably glowing. Her expression was a strange mix of anger, confusion, and something else I couldn't quite read. She avoided my eyes, her cheeks darkening from light blue to deep violet. Something I'd recently learned meant extreme embarrassment for the Xyrith commander, Tegothera. Admiral Harrington nodded with strained formality. Welcome, we're currently reviewing the incident. I did not agree to testify in this hearing. Sael Thara answered, her voice calm and low. Her English was flawless, but carried a faint metallic undertone like a violin string vibrating just beneath the surface. I was summoned as a witness. I'll keep this brief. Her tail was still glowing. Tiny pulses of light raced along its length like stars sliding across a galactic stream. I couldn't stop looking, which of course was exactly why I was here. Major Anderson claims that he merely complimented a part of your anatomy. Was he aware of the cultural implications of such a statement? The Admiral asked carefully. Sael Thara's tail suddenly lashed once through the air, then curled into a slow, deliberate question mark. The glow intensified, spreading from the base to the tip in a single rapid wave. In our culture, she said slowly, the tail is a personal expression of our highest emotional state. It responds to internal feelings beyond conscious control. When a Xyrith's tail reacts to another individual, it is, she paused and my heart practically stopped. A sign of profound biological attraction. The deepest kind, a murmur rolled through the chamber. I swear I could hear the recording camera swivel in response. And for someone to comment on a Xyrith's tail in public. Admiral Harrington continued, barely hiding the curiosity in her voice. It is equivalent, said one of the Xyrith delegates, his voice like ice, to describing another person's sexual arousal in graphic detail. In front of an audience, it is an unforgivable offense. I buried my face in my hands. Oh God, I had just complimented an alien officer's genital display mechanism in front of her entire crew. This hearing could end my career, or worse, it could shatter the fragile alliance between our species. I didn't know. I said softly, shame creeping into my voice. I honestly didn't know what it meant. I just thought it was beautiful, like someone's hair or eyes. But you stared at my tail for weeks, Sael. Thara cut in suddenly, every time we met in the briefing room, on the command deck. even during meals. Even when I retreated, no one told me anything. I almost shouted, my voice echoing through the chamber. There was nothing in the training manuals, nothing in the Xyrith protocol guide, not a word. Silence again, and the horrible truth settled in. I had unknowingly been broadcasting sexual signals to her for weeks. Her tail had been reacting on its own, totally outside her control, and me, the oblivious idiot, had praised it in public. Deep down, a quiet voice whispered, "You just triggered an interstellar diplomatic crisis with a compliment." And the worst part, even now, at the height of this disaster, I still couldn't help but notice, every time our eyes met, her tail pulsed harder, brighter, as if it was trying to say something neither of us were ready to admit. Admiral Harrington had just asked me to recount everything. From the beginning, in full detail. 7 days ago, I began taking a long breath. And just like that, the memories hit me like a film, playing in reverse. It all started when I got reassigned from the Earth vessel Prometheus to serve as a tactical advisor aboard the Xyrith command ship Luminaris. It was part of a new interplanetary exchange agreement. Cultural, military, diplomatic, sounded important on paper. In reality, I was being dropped into uncharted alien territory. "Don't screw this up," Anderson, Captain Stevens, had told me, clapping a hand on my shoulder before departure. "Those shiny blue bastards are key allies in the war against the Kaltar coalition." I nodded, completely unaware that his words would soon become less of a warning and more of a curse. The shuttle dropped me off in Luminaris' hangar bay, and the first thing I noticed was the light. Nothing like the cold, utilitarian gloom of Earth ships. On Luminaris, everything glowed: walls, ceilings, even the floor. Not in a blinding fluorescent way, but a soft, organic glow, like the ship itself was breathing. "Major Anderson," a smooth voice called from behind. I turned and found myself face to face with a pair of bottomless, black eyes. That was the first time I saw her, and her tail. Thara stood just a little taller than me. Maybe 6'3", slim but built for command. Her silver-gray uniform clung to her body like it had grown there, reflecting light off her pale, blue-tinted skin. Her hair, if you could even call it that, was a cascade of fine, translucent, silver strands swept neatly behind her head. But the thing I couldn't look away from was the tail. Long, graceful, covered in shimmering reflective scales that caught the light like flowing mercury. It moved behind her like it had its own thoughts. "Commander Thara," I replied, doing my best to sound composed. "It's an honor to serve aboard your ship. Follow me," she said simply. "No small talk, no pleasantries, just pure efficiency. I'll take you to your assigned station." As she turned, I caught the tail's motion, a slow, perfect arc through the air, like living sculpture. It wasn't just a body part. It felt aware. And as I followed her, I swear I saw it shimmer just slightly, with a faint glow trailing along its length. The first 3 days on Luminaris were held professionally, at least. The Xyrith weren't exactly warm and fuzzy. Efficient. Absolutely cold. Terrifyingly so. Every officer under Thara's command looked at me like I was a raw slab of meat tossed into a lab experiment. And Thara herself, she was worse. "Your tactical analysis is suboptimal," she said during our first briefing, voice flat and emotionless. "Your species is overly emotional." Illogical. I did my best to stay calm. "That's our strength, Commander. Sometimes being illogical leads to the most unpredictable solutions." She let out a quiet, dismissive hum. And then something strange happened. Her tail, which was normally coiled neatly behind her during meetings, suddenly uncurled, slowly, deliberately. Then it bent slightly in my direction. The scales lit up. A soft trail of blue-green light ran down the length of it. I couldn't stop staring. It was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen, like watching a miniature aurora flicker across living, silver style. Thara abruptly paused, glanced down at her tail, then turned away. I swear her skin flushed from light blue to a faint violet. The meeting ended early. Day by day, I started to notice a pattern. Every time I pushed back against her in discussion, challenged her, or simply locked eyes with her, her tail reacted. Sometimes it twitched, sometimes it shimmered brighter, but it always reacted to me. And then I started watching her tail more, not out of scientific curiosity, but because it was mesmerizing. I began to wonder, was it soft? Were the scales cool to the touch? Could it wrap around a person's arm like a silver serpent? On the 5th day, we were in the strategy room going over fleet movements. I glanced up and saw her watching me. She knew. She knew I'd been looking at her tail. "Is there something wrong with my body, Major?" she asked, her voice like ice. No, No, nothing, I stammered. I've never seen any being. I hesitated, already past the point of no return. A part of their body and beautiful dead silence. A nearby Zyreth officer dropped his tablet. Another let out a sound somewhere between a cough and a choke, and Sayelthara's tail lit up like a supernova. Not just a shimmer. The whole thing blazed with light, rippling like it had a mind of its own. It curled around her arm, then stretched outward, quivering, almost like it was trying to reach for me. Her skin flushed deep violet. Meeting adjourned, she said, her voice trembling, actually trembling, which no Zyreth officer had ever done, and stormed out of the room, her tail still glowing, still vibrating with enough intensity that I could hear the scales brushing against each other. I hadn't even had time to process what had just happened when a senior Zyreth officer turned to me, eyes wide with what I can only describe as equal parts horror and amusement. "Major Anderson," he said, voice low and deliberate, "you have just performed the boldest courtship gesture in Zyreth human diplomatic history." That's when I realized I had seriously, catastrophically screwed up. But the real disaster that didn't come until 2 days later, during a joint crew meeting between Earth and Zyreth personnel. Still oblivious to the cultural landmine I'd stepped on, I turned to Sayelthara and said out loud in front of everyone, "Commander, I still think your tail is truly beautiful." The entire room went dead quiet. Her tail lit up again, but this time like a signal flare, blazing, pulsing, alive. And just like that, the diplomatic flagship crashed headfirst into the iceberg. After the incident at the meeting, I went back to my quarters, tapping my fingers restlessly on the metal desk. The atmosphere aboard Luminaris had shifted completely. No one said anything outright, but the way they looked at me, it was different. The Zyreth officers whispered to each other in their own language whenever I passed. Sometimes I caught stares, not just confused, but curious, maybe even intrigued. But with Sayelthara, things had taken a far more complicated turn. She started avoiding me. 2 full days passed after the public tail compliment incident, and I barely saw her. She skipped routine briefings and sent her second-in-command instead, citing urgent tasks that had never happened before. Zyreth commanders never let personal emotions override duty. Never. But on the 3rd morning, I ran into her completely by accident in one of the hoverlifts. The doors sealed shut. Just the 2 of us standing in a confined space. The soft ambient light reflected off her silver skin. I could hear her breathing steady but quicker than usual. And her tail, it wasn't just glowing. It was changing color from its usual silver shimmer. It shifted into a soft blue, then pale violet, and finally into a radiant pink I had never seen on any Zyreth before. "Commander," I said, breaking the thick silence, "I'm sorry about what happened. I didn't mean to offend you." She stood perfectly still, eyes locked on the elevator doors. "Major Anderson, ignorance doesn't mean you didn't make a mistake, I understand." I nodded, but I want to understand more. Why does the Zyreth tail react that way? Why does it light up every time I enter a room? Her tail snapped sharply, clearly outside her control. Sayelthara clenched her fists, the joints in her fingers turning silver white under pressure. "That is not part of your mission," she said coldly. The door slid open and she stepped out quickly. But just before she disappeared from view, I swear her tail flicked gently back toward me. A reflex, instinctive, almost vulnerable. It didn't match her words at all. I needed answers, and if I couldn't get them from her, I had to find them elsewhere. The only person I could even think to ask was Zextahal, the Zyreth science officer he'd studied on Earth, and seemed a little more flexible than the rest of his kind. I found him in the bioresearch lab, examining some glowing fungus from Proxima b. "Hello, Major," he greeted without looking up from his microscope. "I've heard about your incident. I need to understand," I said, straight to the point. Why does Sayelthara's tail react to me like that? And why did my compliment trigger such a strong response? Zextahal finally looked up. His face was hard to read, but I could have sworn I saw a flicker of amusement in those dark, bottomless eyes. "Major Anderson," he began slowly, "the Zyreth tail is not just an anatomical appendage. It is both a biological and spiritual expression. It reflects our truest emotions beyond conscious control. But why does it light up when I'm near her?" I pressed. He set down his tools, turning to face me fully. "The tail only illuminates under 3 conditions: extreme danger, extreme pain," or he paused, "extreme attraction." "Attraction," I echoed. "You mean biological attraction," he said plainly. "Emotion, desire, love. Call it what you want." He studied me carefully. The tail only reacts that way when we're deeply drawn to someone. My mouth went dry. You mean Thara? Yes. Zextahal nodded. She is experiencing a powerful biological response to you, one she cannot control. His tone turned serious. This has never happened with someone of her rank. In fact, it has never happened between a Zyrith and a human. Oh God, I muttered. And your constant staring at her tail, he added clearly, enjoying my discomfort. In our culture, that's considered the most blatant act of seduction possible. It's like staring at a naked woman and openly commenting on her body over and over. I almost choked, and I said that in front of the entire crew. Correct, he confirmed, nodding. You publicly propositioned the highest-ranking officer on the ship. In front of everyone, he smirked slightly. But what really shocked them wasn't your behavior. It was her tail's reaction. I don't follow. If a Zyrith rejects a courtship, he explained, their tail goes stiff, dull, expressionless. But Thara's, it lit up brilliantly, uncontrollably, in full view of the entire crew. He leaned in. That means she didn't just accept the gesture, she returned it openly. My world started to tilt. She thought I was hitting on her. Not just hitting on her, Zextahal said, now dead serious. In Zyrith culture, looking at and complimenting someone's tail is equivalent to proposing marriage. He held my gaze and her tail said yes. I leaned back against the wall, legs weak. Everything started falling into place, the way she avoided me, the looks from the crew, the way her tail always responded every time I got close. How do I fix this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Zextahal went quiet for a long moment. Fix it, he said finally. Are you sure that's what you want to do? What do you mean? The Zyrith tail never lies, he said simply. It speaks the truth beyond logic, beyond restraint. If Thara's tail responds to you, then that is her truth. He tilted his head, eyes sharp. The real question is, what's your truth, Major Anderson? I didn't answer, I didn't have to, because deep down I already knew. I'd been drawn to Thara from the moment I saw her, not just because she looked otherworldly, but because she was strong, brilliant, mysterious. Zextahal seemed to read my silence. There's no shame in it, Major. The universe is vast. Emotions don't obey species lines. As I left the lab, my head was still spinning. One glance, one compliment, one uncontrollable, glowing tail, and everything had changed. What I didn't know was this. Thara had been standing just around the corner. She'd heard everything, and as I walked away, her tail began to glow again, softly, gently, but this time with no attempt to hide it. After my conversation with Zextahal, it felt like I was walking through a minefield. Every corridor, every glance, every step on Luminaris carried weight. Now heavier, deeper, more tangled than before. I wasn't just a tactical advisor anymore. I was the guy who accidentally proposed to the ship's commander. And worse, she hadn't said no. That night, the corridor alarm blared. A fleet of pirate ships from the Draconis system had attacked a nearby refueling station. Luminaris was being deployed for support, and for the first time since the tail incident, I would be working side by side with Thara in a live combat situation. The command deck was tense when I stepped in. Thara stood tall at the central console, her silhouette outlined by the dim cold blue glow of the room. She didn't turn around as I approached, but her tail, normally still and rigid in combat, twitched slightly at the sound of my footsteps. Major Anderson, she said, eyes fixed on the display. Tactical assessment. I stepped beside her, maintaining a professional distance, but close enough to see the details on the holographic battle map. They've got 4 small ships. High mobility, I said calmly. Recommend we split into 4 strike units, surround them from all sides. Draconis fighters aren't great at handling multiple threat vectors. She nodded once, then finally turned to look at me. Our eyes met for just a second. But it was enough to see something shift in hers, something uncertain. Execute, she said flatly. The battle was quick. Clean, my plan worked flawlessly. Luminaris' 4 ships converged from separate angles, boxing the pirates in without firing a shot. They surrendered almost immediately. As the crew exhaled in relief, a quiet wave of satisfactions spread across the deck. Well done, Thara said, and for the first time she nodded in genuine approval. Your strategy was illogical, but effective, I smiled faintly. That's what we're best at, Commander, illogical but effective. Then it happened. Her tail started to glow. Not the subtle shimmer I'd seen before. This was a full cascade, from silver to blue to violet to a brilliant pink. A radiant electromagnetic wave traveled from base to tip, lighting up the entire room. Thara stared at her tail, wide-eyed in panic. She turned away, but it was too late. Everyone had seen it. No one said a word. The silence was louder than any alarm. "Dismiss," she ordered, voice trembling. Major Anderson with me, I followed her into a small briefing chamber just off the deck. The doors sealed behind us. She stood with her back to me, shoulders tight. Her tail was still glowing, still trembling, despite her obvious attempts to control it. "Major," she said softly, "you need to stop looking at me like that." "Like what?" She spun around. "Like I'm something you've never seen before, like you. Admire me. I don't mean to," I said honestly, "but I can't help it." I swallowed, choosing my words carefully. "I think you're beautiful, not just your tail. All of you." Her tail lashed out bright as fire and snapped in my direction. She shut her eyes tight, struggling to regain control. "Don't look at me like that," she hissed. I can't control this biological response, and it's a disgrace to the council." "Why is it a disgrace?" I asked, stepping closer. "If it's real, because I am Commander," she nearly shouted. "Because I'm supposed to be in control of myself. Because no Xyrath has ever reacted to someone outside our species." She stopped breathing hard. "And because you don't even know what you're doing." "I do now," I said, voice lowering. Zextahel explained it, the tail. "What it means, what I accidentally did when I complimented it." She stared at me, eyes wide. "And you're still here? Still looking at me like that?" "I didn't mean to make your tail glow," I said quietly. "But I wasn't lying. I think it's beautiful. You are." She took a small step back, leaning against the softly glowing wall. "No one's ever said that before," she whispered. "No one's dared. Our tails, they're not judged by beauty. They're sacred, private, emotional." "And what's it saying about you right now?" I asked, stepping closer again. She looked down at her still glowing tail, then back at me. And for the first time, I saw something crack in her armor. Something soft. "It's saying," she began slowly, "that I can't control how I feel when I'm near you. That something about you makes it react constantly, and that terrifies me." "Why? Because I'm Xyrath and you're human," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Because I'm your superior, because we come from different worlds." I took another step, only inches between us now, but we're on the same ship, in the same sector, under the same stars. A beat of silence, then slowly, hesitantly, her tail began to move. "Toward me, I've never," she whispered, "never let anyone touch my tail. Before I won't touch it, I promised. Not unless you want me to." And then, as if moved by a will of its own, her tail gently wrapped around my wrist, cool, silken, alive. The tiny scales pulsed under the soft light, like it was speaking in a language only hearts could hear. "It likes you!" Thara breathed in her own voice. "It's never done in this before." We stood there in silence, connected not by words but by something deeper. A biological bridge between two species. I could feel the pulse within her tail like a second heartbeat, matching mine. "Where could this lead?" I asked finally. She looked up at me, her eyes holding galaxies. "I don't know, but I want to find out." Her tail tightened gently around my wrist, like it was answering for her. And in that quiet moment in the vastness of space, two beings from different worlds found a single point of connection where hearts and tails could beat in unison. 3 days after that confrontation in the briefing room, something between Thara and me began to shift. Not in any obvious way, nothing anyone could point at directly, but the changes were there in the small things. The way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching, the way her tail didn't shy away anymore, and even reached out ever so slightly whenever we were near each other. We didn't talk about that moment. We didn't have to, because both of us knew something had changed. Forever on the fourth morning, while I was eating in the shared crew mess, Zextahal slid into the seat across from me without a word of greeting. "Incredible," he said flatly. "I've never seen a Xyrath tail react like that. Not even in our oldest recorded archives. I still don't really understand it," I admitted. "Why me? Why a human? Maybe it's the difference that makes it magnetic," he shrugged. "Or maybe if I may be less scientific, it's fate." He gave me a look full of quiet meaning. "Among our people, there's an ancient belief sometimes the universe forges connections that defy species logic. Even reason?" I was about to respond when the emergency alert blared through the ship. "All senior personnel report to command immediately. This is not a drill." Zextahal and I locked eyes, then bolted for the command center. By the time we arrived, everything had changed. Gone was the usual calm precision of the Xyrith crew. What replaced it was tension, sharp, heavy, nearly hostile. Sayalthara stood in the center of the room, posture rigid, tail held stiff. No movement, and I knew now that meant she was suppressing intense emotion. Next to her, a massive screen displayed the face of a high-ranking Xyrith official I'd never seen before. Everyone is present. Sayalthara began, her voice cold and formal. I've just received orders from the Xyrith High Council. She paused, her eyes flicked to me for the briefest of moments. The temporary alliance between Earth and Xyrith has been suspended, pending investigation. A wave of murmurs swept across the room. Shock on both sides of the crew. What reason, I asked, unable to contain myself. Sayalthara didn't meet my gaze. Reports of a severe diplomatic breach between officers of both parties until a violation of interspecies protocol. I felt my blood turn to ice. She was talking about us, about me. About a glowing tail and stolen glances that meant more than either of us had ever said aloud. What are the orders? Zextahal asked, his face now solemn. All Earth personnel are to vacate Luminaris within 12 hours. Sayalthara replied, her voice steady but brittle. A shuttle will transport you to Artemis Station. From there, you'll be repatriated to an Earth vessel, Wylens. 2 months of collaboration, trust, shared tech, mutual discovery torn apart over what? A glowing tail, a look held too long. This is official, I asked, my voice low. For the first time, Sayalthara looked me in the eye, and in that moment I saw something I'd never seen in her before. Pain, it is an order, Major Anderson. So that's it, I asked quietly. We just end it like this. Her tail quivered reflexively, but she pulled it back into rigid stillness. Prepare for departure, Major. 8 hours later, I stood aboard the Earth shuttle staring through the viewport at Luminaris. Most of the crew had already boarded. I was the last one left. Some part of me, maybe the stupid, reckless part, still hoped she would come. Say goodbye, say anything. But as the shuttle doors began to close, she still hadn't appeared. Major, we have to launch. The pilot urged. I nodded, turning away from Luminaris. But just before the doors sealed, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure at the far end of the corridor. Sayalthara. She stood there watching from a safe distance, not moving, and even from across the bay I saw it. Her tail was dark. No light, no pulse, no movement. The door closed. The shuttle pulled away. I stared out the viewport, heart heavy. Not just because the alliance had been broken, but because something else, something far more personal, had been cut short before it ever had the chance to begin. Preparing for spacefall, Major, the pilot said. We'll arrive at Artemis in about 3 hours. I nodded again, not trusting my voice. A part of me was still back there on Luminaris, lost in unsaid words, unanswered questions, and a connection that refused to fade. The shuttle drifted away from the Xyrith flagship, gliding toward the black expanse. But the universe rarely lets a story end on schedule, Major. The pilot suddenly shouted. Multiple inbound signatures closing fast. I rushed to the console. What kind of ships? Scanning Kaltar warships, he said, his voice tightening. At least 6 of them, and they've locked onto us. My blood ran cold. The Kaltar interstellar terrorists, fanatics, who believed each species should remain isolated. They hunted diplomatic missions like ours. Send a distress call to Luminaris. Now, I ordered. They're out of range, the pilot said, panic rising. And Artemis is too far. We won't get back up in time. The screen showed the Kaltar ships closing in, circling us like a pack of predators. We were unarmed. Just a shuttle, no match. Raise shields, I said, knowing it would buy us seconds. Nothing more. Prep escape pods. There's not enough time, sir, the pilot said grimly. They've got firing solutions. We've got maybe 2 minutes. I sank into the co-pilot's chair, racking my brain. But for the first time in my military career, there was no tactic, no path, no miracle strategy. We were dead. Maybe we send a blind SOS, the pilot offered, clinging to hope. Someone out there might do it, I said, even though we both knew no one would make it in time. He hit the beacon. I closed my eyes and saw her face, that quiet strength, that unspoken emotion, that tail always glowing when I was near her, then Major. What the hell is that? The pilot said, pointing at the radar. I opened my eyes. A massive object was moving toward us, fast from the direction we just left, from the direction of Luminaris. It's Luminaris, I whispered, not daring to believe it. They're coming back. Out of the fold of space, the Zyreth warship emerged, weapons-armed engines blazing. No warning, no negotiations, they opened fire. Blue energy beams tore through the void, slicing into the Calter ships with brutal precision. Within seconds, 4 enemy vessels were crippled. The other 2 fled, then her voice. Earth Shuttle said, the comm steady and unmistakable. Hold your position, we'll ensure your safety. Thara! I couldn't speak. I could only stare as Luminaris tore through the enemy fleet like a storm through dry leaves. In less than a minute, it was over. They saved us. The pilot breathed, stunned. No! Not they. She saved us, Sail. Thara had come back for me, knowing the risks, knowing the consequences. Earth Shuttle, her voice came again, this time softer. We'll escort you to Artemis Station. I finally found my voice. Commander, this might count as disobeying a direct order. A beat of silence. Then I know, Major Anderson, but my tail doesn't care about orders. We'll escort you to Artemis Station. Sail Thara's voice came through the comms, but the pilot shook his head. Major, our engines took damage in the attack. Flight controls are unstable. I opened the channel again. Commander, we've sustained critical damage. We're not going to make it. A pause. Understood, she replied, opening the docking bay. We're bringing you aboard, Luminaris. Bringing us aboard. That was a direct violation of the Zyreth High Council's orders. But before I could respond, a sharp alarm blared in the cockpit. Hostile incoming, the pilot yelled. 2 Calter ships are back. They've called for reinforcements. They're locking onto us. On the screen, Luminaris spun with shocking speed and surged toward our shuttle. At the same time, red-hot energy beams streaked toward us from the Calter ships. Sail Thara! It's too late, I shouted, fall back. But the warning came too late. One of the beams punched through our weakened shields, exploding against the auxiliary control panel. I was thrown against the wall, my head slamming into a console. Smoke and scorched metal filled the cabin. Through the haze, I saw the pilot slumped over, blood trickling from his forehead. Sail Thara. I rasped, trying to reach the comm controls. Another explosion rocked the shuttle. Red lights flashed everywhere. The onboard AI chimed in cold and emotionless. Warning. Hull breach, detected atmosphere loss in 60 seconds. I dragged myself toward the emergency suit locker, but my leg was pinned under a fallen beam. Vision blurred, air thinning. I was going to die here in the void, far from Earth and even farther from her. Then, through the smoke came light. Not red, not from alarms. Blue, then violet, then bright, burning pink. The shuttle doors burst open. Sail Thara stepped through, her black eyes sweeping the wreckage. Her tail glowed so bright it lit the entire compartment. She wore full Zyreth combat armor, except for her helmet, risking decompression just to reach me. Anderson, she called out, her voice sharp with urgency. Where are you? Here, I tried to call out, but my voice was lost in the chaos. She didn't need me to answer. Her tail, almost like it felt me, extended forward, glowing like a beacon, guiding her through the smoke. She reached me fast, kneeling at my side. Can you move? She asked, inspecting the gash on my forehead. My leg, I grimaced, pointing to the beam. She said nothing, just gripped the metal with both hands and lifted. The strength of the Zyreth never failed to amaze me. Slim as they looked, they were 3 times stronger than humans. She freed my leg and pulled me up, slinging my arm over her shoulder. We have to get out, she said. This ship's about to blow. The pilot? I pointed weakly to his unconscious form. My team will handle it, she said. And right on cue, 2 Zyreth soldiers appeared in the doorway and rushed to the pilot. We moved toward the exit, but just as we reached the corridor, another blast shook the shuttle. A massive panel broke loose from the ceiling and dropped straight toward us. Look out, I yelled, trying to push her clear, but she didn't move. She pushed me. Then her tail rose, not just a ripple or twitch, but hard and fully extended, braced like a steel beam. It caught the falling debris midair, stopping it cold. Sparks flew, but her tail didn't budge. She held it long enough for 2 soldiers to shove the wreckage aside. I stared at her, stunned. Your tail. It just later she cut in, voice tight. We have to move. We rushed through the smoke-filled corridor toward the small rescue craft docked at the shuttle's flank. But just as we neared it, another explosion rocked the hull. The lights went out. Total darkness except for the glow of her tail. I felt the pressure shift. My ears popped. Air was leaking out. We're close, she panted. Just a few more meters, then a red beam tore through the wall right in front of us, opening a hole straight into the vacuum. Back, she shouted, yanking me away. But another blast followed, ripping a larger hole. The pressure drop became a hurricane. Everything loose was sucked toward the breach, including us. I felt my body lift, pulled by the void. No handholds, no anchor, just the cold, killing breath of space. Then miracle. Her tail snapped out, lashing around a steel beam, still anchored to the wall. At the same time, she wrapped her arms around me, using her body as a shield. "Hold on to me," she screamed, her voice nearly lost to the roar. I clung to her. Her tail tightened around the beam, the scales stiffening, digging into the metal to stay in place. She was using her tail, her most vulnerable sacred limb, to anchor us both against the vacuum. "I can't hold much longer," she groaned. Her body trembled under the strain. Blood, faintly blue, began to leak from cracks in her tail. "Let me go," I said quietly. "You can't save us both." "No," she snarled. "I'm not letting you go." And then, through the breach light, a rescue vessel, Zyreth, 3 armored soldiers burst in through a new opening, firing magnetic tethers our way. "Catch." One of them yelled. I reached, caught it, pulled it toward us. Thara grabbed hold, one arm still wrapped around me, the other around the cable. Slowly, painfully, they reeled us in. We collapsed into the rescue ship, the hatch slamming shut behind us. She collapsed, her tail still glowing faintly, lay limp on the floor. Bloodied, burned, trembling, Thara. I dropped to my knees beside her, cradling her head in my arms. "You're hurt." "Not bad," she panted, forcing a smile. But I saw it, the pain in her face. "Tail? It'll heal. Why?" I asked, voice cracking. "Why risk everything? You could have left me. That would have been the logical thing." She looked at me, her black eyes full of light and agony. "Biological response," she whispered. "Remember, our tails never lie." I looked down at her wounded tail, still pulsing, still alive, still glowing. I reached out and gently touched it. It was warm, soft, alive. "I thought it just glowed," I whispered. "Turns out it saved my life." She gave a small laugh, a sound I'd never heard from a Zyreth commander. "Our tails can do a lot of things," she murmured, "but they only do them for someone they choose." I took her hand. Emotion rose in my chest like a tide. "I don't know if I've fallen in love with an alien or a woman," I said. "All I know is I'm not losing you." She stared at me and a single blue tear slid down her cheek. "My tail chose you before my heart did," she whispered. "It knew before I knew." Her tail lifted again, shaky, bruised, but still glowing. It gently curled around my wrist, not with the fierce intensity from before, but with warmth and softness, like a flicker of firelight in the cold. And as it touched me, I could feel something strange, something beautiful. The wounds beginning to close, as if even her body knew that I was part of the healing. "What do we do now?" I asked, knowing full well she had defied every order to save me. She looked up at me, and this time her eyes were clear. "Strong now," she said, "we rewrite the rules." The rescue ship turned and headed back toward Luminaris. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about alliances or protocols. This was about something more. 2 beings from 2 worlds connected not by law or logic, but by something far deeper, something that pulsed through the body like light through a tail, something we call love. "Major Anderson, you're awake." I opened my eyes. Soft, ambient light glowed from the ceiling of Luminaris' medical bay. I had no idea how long I'd been out. I flexed my fingers. That familiar sensation was still there, cool, smooth, alive. I turned my head, and there she was. Thara sat beside my bed, her tail gently wrapped around my wrist. "Commander," I whispered, my voice rough. "We made it, I told you," she replied with a rare, delicate smile on her pale blue face. "Our tails heal themselves." Her tail had fully recovered, not a trace of the damage it had taken to save my life. But something about it had changed. It wasn't glowing wildly anymore. Instead, it pulsed gently. Steady, warm, peaceful. "The glow, it's different," I said, running my fingers along the smooth scales. She nodded. "Because it doesn't need to get your attention anymore. It's already found its person," I swallowed. "And the High Council cell." Thara's voice took on a new tone, wry, almost amused. "The world changed while we were asleep," she said. "Turns out news of a Zyreth commander risking her life to save an Earth advisor, using her sacred tail to shield him, spreads faster than light." "You're kidding." "I'm not," she nodded. "The surveillance footage from the shuttle was transmitted to both planets, and it made an impression. An impression that despite your species' physical limitations," she said, almost teasing, "you possess the ability to form emotional bonds powerful enough to trigger a Zyreth tail. a tail that never lies to react in ways no one has ever seen. She looked straight into my eyes. The High Council had no choice but to admit, maybe there's something about humanity we haven't fully understood. And that means not only is the Alliance restored, she said, a glimmer in her dark eyes, it's been upgraded. We've been appointed as official leads for the expanded Interstellar Exchange Initiative. My eyes widened. You mean, she leaned in closer. We'll be spearheading a new era. One focused not just on military or scientific cooperation, but emotional understanding as well. I couldn't help but laugh. All because of a glowing tail. No, she said softly, because a tail found something our entire civilization has never dared to look for connection beyond species. 6 months later, I stood on the hangar deck of Luminaris, watching a group of fresh cadets from Earth's Space Academy board the ship, 20 bright faces. Most of them seeing a Xy'reth in person for the first time. Major Anderson, one young cadet, waved. Her eyes sparkled. It's an honor to meet you. We studied your story with Commander Sael Thara in our interstellar diplomacy course. It was inspiring. Another cadet nodded. He looked around cautious. Is it true what they say, that a Xy'reth's tail glows when they feel strong emotions? I smiled, remembering that moment of wonder when I first learned the same truth. Every word of it, and Commander Sael Thara, another cadet whispered, hesitant, does her tail still glow when she's near you? Yes, then Sael Thara stepped through the main entryway, in full uniform, commanding as ever. But when her eyes met mine, a faint smile played at the corner of her lips. Her tail moved not with the surge, not glowing uncontrollably, but with calm, graceful ease behind her. I replied, eyes still locked with hers. It doesn't light up like it used to. Why not? The cadet asked, almost disappointed. Because it doesn't need to anymore, I said as Sael Thara joined me. She doesn't have to send a signal because I never left. She stopped at my side. Her tail reached out and lightly brushed my back, a quiet gesture of affection. Now second nature. Welcome aboard, Luminaris Sael. Thara addressed the group, her voice warmer than it had been 6 months ago. You are the first class to be trained in a truly interstellar environment. Major Anderson and I will teach you not just protocol and strategy, but how to navigate the emotional landscapes between species. I gently reached for her hand, her tail again curled around my wrist, not with wild reactive motion, but with intent, with love. And one more thing I told the cadets. When you meet a Xy'reth for the first time, never comment on their tail. Unless you're ready for a journey the universe itself might not be prepared for. Sael. Thara's gaze met mine, and for a moment that silent understanding passed between us again, just like it had in the beginning. And that night alone together in our quarters, her tail glowed once more, not because of uncontrollable biology, but because she was happy. That glow didn't need to be bright anymore. It was warm, steady, quiet, like a flame that had finally found its home, where there were no storms left to weather, no more loneliness floating in the void. It had found where it belonged, in my arms. Sometimes in the vastness of the universe, the deepest connections are born from the sweetest misunderstandings. This wasn't a story about Earth and Xy'reth. It was about two souls crossing boundaries of language, culture, and even biology to find each other. Like Sael Thara once said, my tail chose you before my heart did, because no matter the planet, no matter the form, real love doesn't need to shine brightly to be seen. Sometimes it just needs to be felt in the rhythm of a heartbeat or the gentle stir of a glowing tail.